stage of any process, you've got to decide what route you're going to take and why you're taking that route. And so we were all independent from cycling. None of us had been involved in British cycling or that programme before. So it was a great and quite a steep learning curve for us initially. So what we asked for from British Cycling and also UK Sport were several and indeed dozens of policies and documentation in order to give us an overview. We then needed to get first-hand accounts, and it was very important that we identified different groups. So if you're talking at an almost reverse organic level, you have the board at the top, so there are going to be figures there. Then there are going to be senior leadership figures within the world-class programme. There are going to be staff members, from coaches to other forms of support staff, including medical staff, and then the athlete side. And of course, the athlete side includes the non-disabled and para-athletes, and within the world-class programme includes those on the track and those on the road and other disciplines such as BMX and mountain biking. So what we did is we asked British Cycling and UK Sport to send out invitations to their entire mailing lists of both current and former athletes over the last 2 Olympiads. So we're talking about going back to 2008 here. We invited submissions, initially in written form, and we had a pro forma document for them to fill in. And having received those written submissions, there were ones that we wanted then to interview. So we received 108 written submissions, which is a large number, and we had 44 verbal interviews. And we used different methods to do this because they were located in different places. Many of them were down in London, but we also travelled up to Manchester. We visited the velodrome. We carried out some interviews there on different occasions. So in terms of process, that's how we decided to adopt our evidence gathering stage, and that lasted approximately 6 months. Then, of course, what we needed to do was to go through all the evidence that we had gathered, look over the notes, confidentiality being very, very important. We knew everybody that we'd met, we knew everybody who'd given submissions. If there were any submissions that were anonymous, we couldn't give them much weight, if any at all. And then we had to sit down as a panel, and we spent some days, deliberating over various areas. And part of that was to identify key themes so that we could produce a report, at least in draft form then, which was well structured and could be digested. And the areas that I've touched on, including at board level, at staff level, at athlete level, but then also the interface with UK Sport, were, if you like, the overall subheadings that the meat of our findings then were based on. So we spent a number of days deliberating. We then spent time obviously drafting the report, and it's gone through various stages, as you would expect. Our first draft report was produced at the end of last year. In response to that, the initial terms of remit were that only our key findings and recommendations would be published. In other words, the headlines, which in the report which was being published today, the initial section and the final section. But a lot of the narrative behind that was to be confidential to British Cycling and UK Sport, but also taking into account only fairly the confidentiality of those who had participated. And for reasons I can go into, at least initially, there could have been a slight reluctance to participate in this review, but thankfully as time went on, that reluctance seems to have dissipated. So there was a change of remit in the spirit of transparency, which was directed to us by the commissioning board. And we were told that the entire report would then be published, which we were more than happy about. But then we needed to go through 2 stages. The first stage was to look at our entire draft report and to make sure that in no way whatsoever was confidentiality of those who had contributed being breached. Because of course, if that had happened, it would have entirely undermined the integrity of the report, not only in terms of what we had done, but what we were trying to achieve for sport as a whole. So that was a very important step. Once we'd done that, the second stage was a stage called Maxwellisation, which means that before a report is sent out and becomes a public report, those who may face draft criticisms in it are given a right of reply. That's nothing more than fairness and good process. And it allowed us, of course, then to read more detailed responses to very specific draft findings we'd made. It also led to more information which we hadn't received to date being given to us. And quite rightly and properly, the panel then again took time to look at these additional submissions from various sources, to look at the additional information we'd received, and then to finesse our findings. But one thing I would emphasise is our key findings and recommendations did not change. What did change, and this was only appropriate, was some of the narrative within the meat of the document. And then ultimately that's led to today, and the long anticipated, as it's been termed, 14 months since it began, publication of the final report.